Hi, I'm Maren from Chanhassen Library, and I'm here to share a spring watercolor with you. It's a simple technique using wet on wet and salt crystals to create an interesting texture. We'll be using the salt in order to create a field of flowers. So it's pretty simple what you need, just your palette of watercolors. I do have a larger palette of watercolors that are Crayola that are easy to find at the store. And I picked this up because I have more variety of colors to use in spring colors for the landscape. I have a variety of brushes, also just Crayola. I have my watercolor paper, some painter's tape, jar of water, fresh water. I'm going to be taping this down onto the cookie sheet. And then last we have I have kosher salt or table salt. It doesn't matter. I'm just going to use this kosher salt because I like the way it pours out. Easier to control the amount of salt that I pour onto the painting. So we're just going to start out. I'm going to tape it down because we're going to be coating the sheet with watercolor, getting the entire sheet wet. I'm figuring about an 8 by 10 picture, and so I've left an inch around, extra inch. So 8 by 10, I have it cut to 10 by 12. And I'm just guesstimating here, covering the edge for about an inch. If you want to be precise, you could get out a ruler and measure it, but I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just making sure you have it taped all around the edge. Oh, there it is. Okay. And then I'm just going to start by getting plain water on there, covering the sheet with water. I'm not going to super soak it, but just a light coating. If I put too much water on there, I'm afraid it's going to buckle. Oh, and I forgot the one other supply we're going to need is paper towel. It's always good to have around when you're working with watercolor. All right. Okay, so now I'm going to start with my sky. I'm picking this lighter blue. I might put a little darker in there. And when you look at a landscape, you may notice that the sky gets darker as it moves up from the horizon. So it's going to go from a darker blue to lighter as it meets the ground. And I'm going to bring this color in just about a third of the way. Don't have to be real precise, but just a nice wash. There. And I'm wiping that out, and now I'm going to go in and start just putting little dabs of color around, like I have different flowers out in a field, and just dabbing around. This is the fun part. You just gotta pretend and imagine that you're looking at a pretty field of flowers. I'm gonna put a little darker color in there. think I'll put some yellows in. You do want to think about the colors running into each other and what that mix of color might look like, because you could end up having a muddy color. So I'm being a little bit careful about where I put the color in, thinking about that a little. I think some orange would be great in there. Where did I get that from? We'll put some pink in. So think about colors that are going to blend nice together and not get too muddy. There. A little bit more of that. And I'm going to put some touches of green in there because we are pretending we're looking at a field of flowers, and so there's going to be greens in there. Just little dabs around. Some at the top here. Oh, I like those colors. Now I can see where the paper is bending and pooling a little bit with the watercolor, so I'm just going to take a little bit of my paper towel and dab that up, and that actually creates an interesting texture too, so don't be concerned about that. And the paper is starting to dry a little bit. It's not super wet. You can kind of see there's a little glisten on it. I know you can't see it with the camera, but it's not super dry yet, but it's not super wet. So you're kind of waiting for a little bit of an in-between. So it's still wet to the touch, but not water pooling on there. So I'm at the good point where I can go ahead and sprinkle my salt on there. And I'm putting quite a bit on because I want that to create a texture. Like those are bursts of flowers out in a field. And so the next stage of this is letting this sit for an hour or two to dry, or even overnight if you want to. And so we don't have to wait. I already have one that is prepared. I'm going to put this one aside, but you can see how that salt is sprinkled on there. I did go pretty heavy on it in order to create an effect. And then I'm gonna show you the one that I did yesterday. And you can see the salt is still on there, but I'm gonna just brush it off. And you can see how it's created interesting crystallized texture in here. There. So it's really a fun technique to create texture. And I'm going to put this aside. And I'm going to go in and I'm going to put with a finer brush, create some stems and leaves, just to maybe make it a little more realistic. So I've got some green on here, and so I've got my greens over there. My paint is not super wet. I've used a lot of the paint on it, so I can kind of do a light brush strokes that also create some textures, just like I have leaves in there or stems. Get some of that pretty green. Put some up in here. So just light strokes. It's creating the idea of greenery. And you can try mixing different, I always like a mix of a little bit of green and purple together. It makes kind of a nice shade of green. And in a landscape, when things are closer to you in the foreground, the color gets darker. As it moves away to the horizon line, it gets lighter. So I think you get the idea of this, and I would spend more time on it if I were doing this just not for an example. But it's fun to try, and I hope you have a good time trying it out. And if you want to learn more about watercolor technique, I don't have a specific book to show you today, but there are so many. If you want to come into the library, we are set up for grab and go these days, so you can come in and pick out some watercolor books. We also have magazines if you want to take a look at those and have some fun. Thank you for watching.